Welcome to the Legacy Leaders Podcast. Are you doing the best for your client to help them create their legacy? Are you creating a plan that goes far beyond finances to help people ensure that it becomes the driving force behind all decisions? On this podcast, hosts Katie Beth Hand and Stan Miller will help you with growing your practice and your clients' peace of mind. Together, they bring the best and brightest minds to share with you how to help your clients develop their best legacy. And now, here are your hosts, Katie Beth and Stan.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to welcome you to the Legacy Leaders Podcast. I'm here with my guest today, Sam Trahin. Sam is an entrepreneur, a father, and a husband, and we're very interested to have an exciting conversation about what legacy means to Sam and what his impact with legacy is. Sam, I'd love for you to give us a little bit more detail on your background, and we'll start there.
Sure. Josh, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Yeah, so I grew up in Fort Wayne, Indiana. I was a swimmer for, from age 7 all the way to 26 years old. And, when I was 7 or 8, I told my parents I wanted to go to the Olympics. And so that's what I spent, all my focus, all my energy on from, really that time until 2016. And 2012, I went to Olympic trials, swam against Phelps and some of those guys. And it was a really cool whole process. And I realized when I was done that my whole identity was wrapped up in being a swimmer. So it was quite a shift to come out of that and kind of go into business is what I picked as my path, because I figured, hey, I have the most control here. And, it's kind of like swimming where what you put in is what you get out of it. But I realized pretty quickly that I did not have the foundation of business. My parents were both employees and great people, really hard workers, but not the proper foundation to be able to just jump into business and take off. And so I saw my friends that did have that background able to do that, whereas it was a little more challenging. It took a little bit more time, made a lot more mistakes, had to jump from business to business, try to figure out what I wanted to do. And eventually what I realized is that was not just a me problem, but it was really something that everybody experiences a little bit of is, if your parents weren't, making a ton of money or doing what you're doing now, your foundation may be a little bit off. And so I challenged myself to try to fix that foundation. And on a personal level, before I get into kind of more of the business stuff, I have a wife. We met at Indiana University swimming, and we have 2 boys and a third on the way. And we're super passionate about now changing the education system because we see that the foundation that a lot of kids are getting now is not necessarily aligning to, the world that we have now of rapid change with all this technology coming out. So our goal is really support with that and help other families, change that foundation.
Absolutely. So when we talk about legacy and how not only your business is going to influence the legacy that you ultimately leave, but what just broad definition wise, what does legacy mean to you individually as a person, as a dad, as a husband?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I used to think that legacy was all about me getting my name put up on a building. That's my legacy. But as I've had kids, I've realized that it's more about what I instill in them, because I could hand them $1 million and that's great. But if they don't have the education or the foundation to be able to take that and with principles, share that, that's actually going to make this world a better place, then I feel like, I'm still giving them a legacy, sure. But is it a legacy that's actually going to benefit long-term for not just them, but also everybody else? So I think legacy to me really means what you instill within principles is not only going to help my own kids, my own family, but also, our community and ultimately, the world at large.
Absolutely. I love that. Yeah, it's easy early on to think legacy is in those terms of kind of what it means to yourself rather than the impact that you're leaving and the splash that you're making on the people that are most important to you. But come out of that cocoon real quickly as soon as we have kids, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. So who was an influence early on for you? Who would you say made the biggest legacy in your life when you were a young person growing up?
Yeah, I would say first it was my parents, just because they instilled, they're blue collar workers and just instilled hard work. And I think that's really, really important, especially nowadays, because it's becoming really easy to get instant feedback, instant gratification. But I think when you can instill hard work from an early age, that goes really, really far. But then the second one would be there's a coach I had in college, and he's a pretty quiet guy, not like what you would think of, but he was very, very direct, very to the point. And his name was Mike. Mike was probably the biggest influence that I had up until that point because it made me realize, hard work is important, but thinking outside of just your little box is just important. So he's big on like team, right? Supporting the team and what is your part in the bigger piece. And I never thought about that really before that point. I was always just kind of thinking like, okay, wake up, this is what I do so I can get to my goals, so I can get my things. But he really instilled like, look, if you think big picture, talking about legacy, right? It's like if you think outside of yourself, what's best for everyone else and figure out how you fit into that piece, you can actually get what's best for you and what's best for everyone else. There is an and in there. It's not or. And I think a lot of the times for me and a lot of people I talk to, it's always an or. It's like I can't do what's best for me and everybody else win. It's I win, you lose, or you win, I lose. And I
Right.
think, yeah. And I think when you're growing a family, that's massive to think about because I don't want to say it's easy. That's not the right word. But when you can think about, okay, in this situation, my son's freaking out and I'm trying to do this thing over here. Is there a way that it works out for best of us? Is there a win-win situation here where I can support him to, stabilize himself, see what's going on, and see that how he's reacting isn't best for me or him? And then how can I also benefit from doing that as well? Thinking in terms of that, just bigger picture outside of just yourself. I think
Mhm.
that's I think that's massive when you're looking at, I mean, you have to do that if you're looking at legacy.
Yeah. Yeah, it's incredibly important. I agree in family and at home. And then also when you think about, in business as a self-employed individual, an entrepreneur, if you're not, if you're looking for the situation where you're going to come out on top and somebody else, is going to lose, that's never going to get you very far. So I think in business
Yeah,
development, great thing to keep in mind also,
absolutely.
which I
Yeah.
know, as involved as you are with networking and collaborating. I know that's, obviously a huge focus for you too.
Yep. Yep. It's not natural always.
Yeah.
Like I said, I think, I no blame on my parents or anything like that, but I think as an employee, we're just we're going in, we're clocking in, we're doing what we need to do, and we're getting out of there. And we're just not supported effectively to, you know, come into a situation and be like, okay, what is my piece in this pie? Because if you're an employee, if you're an entrepreneur, it doesn't matter. You're still contributing to a whole and you're a piece in that whole. And so what is your piece? How do you fit into that whole ecosystem? How can you try to benefit, yourself and everyone else?
Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about kind of different levels of legacy and different kind of nuances within the idea of legacy. From what I know about you, and I have the good fortune, we've gotten to know each other, fairly well over the last several months. And from what I've seen, what I'm most impressed by are that there's three different elements of legacy that I see showing up and being present in your life. And I want to honor you for those, but also talk about kind of individually each one of them. The first one, which you touched on, is your swimming journey. So you're highly competitive. Your idea of legacy, from what I understand, was all about performance based and training and things like that. Can you tell me kind of what legacy looked like for you at that stage? I know you kind of touched on it briefly, but anything a little bit deeper that you can share on that?
Yeah, so the reason I wanted to go to the Olympics is because my whole plan was, okay, I'm going to go there and make some kind of impact and then use that impact to help other people. That was my thought around it.
Mhm.
And so it's like, as I've met more and more people, I think I live by this statement, your starting point is your end point. So, what you start your journey with, your intentions you start with, that's going to be your end point if you don't make the proper adjustments along the way. But I think mine was still self-centered. It was still all about me, 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 me. I said I wanted to do those things, but deep down it was more of like Yeah, it's just so I can get recognition. But I think that sometimes that is a jumping off point because you realize there's no fulfillment in that.
Yeah.
And then you're like, okay, well, after pushing and pushing and pushing, like if you look at Phelps, for example, he had all this, after he was done, he had all this mental stuff he had to deal with. And knowing what he did and what he trained and all that kind of stuff, it was like, I mean, he'll admit it to you. It's just, it wasn't the impact that he actually thought it would be. And it was more of a self-interested thing. Although he did make a massive impact, right? Like huge. But it's like, did it actually make a net gain in the whole world, or was it just kind of contributing to how things are now, So I don't know if that answers your question, but when it comes to like competing and stuff like that, the swimming journey for me was more of a self-interested thing, the legacy of myself only. Although I wanted to make a bigger impact, it's just, if I'm being self-honest, I think that's kind of what ended up
Yeah.
happening.
I appreciate that awareness. Was there any piece of it, when I think about, some of my own journey, I feel like early on you do things that may have some element of, kind of being trying to fulfill your own issues. But in my opinion, I feel like sometimes that piece of the journey is about proving to yourself so you can kind of go to the next level. So making yourself feel validated so you can have the confidence to kind of do whatever the next phase is. Do you feel like there's any of that involved in your
Yeah,
case?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. I mean, you have to like self-confidence is massive, and being able to say, okay, cool, I'm gonna go for this, and then actually attaining that.
Yeah.
I mean, just hitting a goal is actually pretty challenging. Like any goal is actually pretty challenging to do because you have to grow in order to hit the goal.
Yeah.
And, like, do you have to put a lot of emphasis on yourself in order to do that? Yeah, for sure. I just think, if I'm to look back on it, if I could instill into myself or into my kids now, go for it, but make sure the direction you're going is actually going to benefit everyone, not just yourself. You can still hit those goals within doing that. And so it comes back to the and, not just or.
Absolutely. Speaking of that, that provides a good opportunity to transition a little bit more to legacy at home. What types of things are you doing within your family to make sure that, obviously thinking about the greater good and having it be a win for everybody is something you just mentioned, but what are some of the other ways that you're trying to create a legacy by what you're doing on a regular basis and big picture?
Yeah, so my wife is amazing with this, but she spends, like her emotional stability is off the charts. I can't do it, but it's really cool. We, from an early age, Teo is my youngest. He was 11 months, and we started instilling, the program that we use just to build his understanding of the world, his vocabulary of everything that's going on around him. And then Koa, he was 2 when we started on, he's my oldest as well. And that, education for us is massive because, and a lot of people look at it and they're like, wait, you're doing education with your kid at 11 months, but they're thinking like we're sitting him in a desk and we're doing a whole classroom because that's what
Yeah.
they're used to, as education. This is not fundamentally different. It's usually 15 minutes max a day, but building in those building blocks really early on is huge. And then supporting them to actually live by principles, which is just more education. But, one of the big principles you probably have picked up on by now is like not just what's best for the individual, but also what's best for everyone in the situation. And that's very challenging to do. I mean, Ashley and I struggle a lot to do that. We all struggle to do that, but it's supporting them from an early age of saying, hey, if you're thinking like this and we get into the pattern of always thinking, not just me, but how is this a win-win? You can start to, you talk about legacy. It's like the biggest return on your investment is your education because you can learn, one new thing and all of a sudden that can 1,000x your business, right? So for them, we try to instill that very early on as principles and then, really building the foundation of their education.
So the idea of education being and learning being very important at home, as you expand that out in your business being centered around the education process and reshaping the way that people learn, how are you bringing that out into the community? And would you share some more specifics with kind of how your business positively impacts the idea of learning and how people are going about it?
Yeah, our goal is to give parents back the authority of education. So, if you think about it, if you know how to tie your shoe, could you teach someone else how to tie their shoe? You could. But yet, parents ship their kids off, at 6, 7, ship their kids off to school, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's, but it's this thought process of like the teacher knows, right? They're the authority, just like with doctors too, is if you have the understanding of a doctor, all of a sudden you can ask better questions. All of a sudden you can get better feedback. You're not just subservient to the doctor. And so our goal is you don't have to take your kids out of school. You don't have to do anything like that. It's more of how can you as the parent make sure that they're 100% prepared for a world of rapid change, no matter what school does, right? How can you be the authority in that? And you don't have a lot of time to do that. Obviously, both parents are typically working now and stuff like that. So our goal, like I said, to give you back the authority as the parent to be the educator, and you can do it in a short amount of time. 30 minutes, 30 minutes max a day is what you need. But that compounding effect has, netted us some amazing results. So, the Harry Potter series?
Yeah, a little
Okay,
bit.
a little bit. I think there's thousands. I've never read them all, but it's thousands of pages if you put all the books together. We have a guy down in Texas. He's 8 years old now. His name's Max.
Mhm.
He's been using TechnoTutor, the system that we use, since he was 1, and now he's 8. He read the whole series of Harry Potter in 2 days. So when you really put that together, it's like it's really wild. We have other kids that are younger, 2, 3, 4, and they're on the same path of what Max was, right? He's just kind of our test subject, if you will. And so we're
About
seeing like
with that.
across the board, like whether you have a learning disability or whether you're super gifted, we can really make sure that they're prepared for, whatever they need to do to adapt quickly. And that's really the piece that if I can get one thing across to parents, it's like no longer are the days of you learn one skill and you ride that skill for the rest of your life.
Yeah.
Even as a parent, like you can't do this anymore because of how fast the world's changing and then it changes again.
Yeah.
So your adaptability is massive. And that's really what at the core of what we do, it's supporting is how quick can you learn something? How quick can you unlearn something? How quick can you learn something again, etc.
So the key to our kids being prepared for a rapidly changing world, do you think, is the ability to increase the rate of comprehension? Is that the main focus of what you're doing?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the faster they can look at, a quick example would be, that ChatGPT is all over right now or out in everybody's face. So they come out with a new system like, I don't know, every couple months. And so if you learn, okay, cool, I got ChatGPT 4.0, I'm good, right? And you're like, I'm using it now, I got this. But then all of a sudden, the O3 model or the next model comes out and you don't have to actually use as much as you learned in the first one. Well, how do you adapt to the new one quickly? And so that skill right there all boils back to your foundation. And this is the thing that I think parents would, when we talk to them at first, they don't see it because they're like, well, I'm learning every day. And like, I'm sure, yeah, of course, right? You are learning every day, but depending on your foundation is how fast you can keep learning, right? So we really want to work on making sure that the foundation is really, really strong so that they can adapt and comprehend, like you said, quickly, because that's really the name of the game in today's world.
Right. Is there a key way to train or help a key area within the learning process that really allows that to happen, take place, where they're not only learning at a faster rate, but they're more adaptable and flexible in the learning process? Is there kind of a critical piece of that you guys emphasize?
And this takes a lot of research and a lot of understanding to get this point, but I'll just kind of put it out there. Vocabulary is massive. How you define vocabulary, you got to figure that out first. But the way we see is vocabulary is every word that you can spell, comprehend, and process, right? There's a guy, Johnson O'Connor, he worked for General Electric. He found that people that made more money had more effective vocabularies. People that had more effective relationships had more effective vocabularies. And we don't think of school as vocabulary, but if you just go and look at a curriculum, it's all words. It's literally all words. And you can say like math, maybe not be words, but those are symbols and they have definitions, right? Like that's what we're talking about when we say vocabulary. And so if I'm to give free advice to parents, especially if your kids are in the first 7 years, they're 7 years or younger, read massive amounts of books to them as much as possible. Get as many words in as possible, not just your own, because you have your own biases in your words, but any books you can get in is going to give them more and more vocabulary at that time. Actually, Harvard did a study. It's called the 30 million word gap. You can look it up on YouTube. But they basically put like a monitor, on parents, and they put them in low income homes and then they put them in high income homes. And they found that in the difference between the two is in the high income homes, they said about 30 million words more than in low income homes.
Wow.
And yeah, and so it kind of goes back to those kids are more they're more able to adapt in the future because they just have more context of everything going on. Yeah, and so if you can get as much in there as possible, that's really the key. The hard part is you have your own biases. And so if you just explain what you think the word means, maybe you have it right, but maybe you have it wrong, right? And so that's the really hard part about just putting in the words yourself.
Yeah. So not just about quantity and volume, but about kind of the diversity of subjects and, the type of material that you expose them to, right?
Yeah, exactly. Mm-hmm.
So it's obviously clear that learning is one of your core values and one it's certainly very worthy of leaving a great legacy. But when you think about learning specifically, I feel like there are kind of three different levels of how you could leave a legacy within the value of learning. And the first one is kind of self-focused, where it's, doing your own pursuit of legacy, or I'm sorry, of learning, making sure that you're transferring that to a future generation. But I think a level up from there, is encouraging, which you're clearly doing, encouraging others on their learning journey and helping them get exposed to different things that are going to, provide foundation for them. But then I think the third, almost the echelon of learning, which I'd like you to discuss a little bit about each one of these levels, but is really reevaluating the learning process and having a big, almost a culture shifting impact on the way that we look at the learning process, like what you're doing with the company. But can you talk a little bit about kind of each of those phases or each of those levels within the idea of learning as a legacy?
Yeah, so break it down one more time for me, just the three levels, so I can make sure I'm clear on this.
Absolutely. Yeah. I should have paused between, but the self-pursuit of learning. So making sure that, you're diverse as far as the concepts and topics that you're familiar with. The second one being encouraging others on their learning journey. And the third is like the meta reshaping what the process of learning looks like.
Okay. In terms of the first one, what was it? One more time. Just the first one.
Yeah, just self-pursuit of learning, like learning.
Self-pursuit. Okay. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I think if you're in this day and age, if you're not learning, they say like after school, it's some, I don't know percentage anymore, but it's some crazy number where it's like the percentage of books that you read after school is very, very low. Like one book, two books most people after they get out of school. And that's really sad because ultimately the people that are reading more are leading more, right? Readers are leaders. And so I think you have to constantly be on top of just what's going on. This is another big point. If you're not looking at what's happening in the world system, you could be learning something that is going to take you to a dead end. Like if you're learning how to be a great, put wheels onto a wagon, right, that the horse carries along, and then Henry Ford comes along and boom, within a decade they're gone. It's like that's a dead end. You're learning the wrong thing. And so it's not just about, focusing on, okay, I'm going to learn, I'm going to get this stuff in, but you have to look at, okay, where's the world system going? What's happening in the world? What direction are we going in? Who are the players that are up there? And then from there, making an educated guess of this is what I think is going to be happening in the future, and then following that path. I think that's a big point to really structure where you're going with your learning. So that's number one. And then Number two, remind me on that one.
Two is encouraging others on their learning journey, some helping participate and make active a part of other people's learning or part of their process, rather.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, and this comes from school, I think we were very conditioned to group think is what I call it. But if everybody's doing it, then okay, cool. Then now it's my turn to do it. But I think really the best thing that you can do to encourage others is work on yourself, right? And I don't mean that from the perspective of like work on yourself so you're so great and you can beat everybody, but work on yourself so you can support other people. Because if you try to support someone, like unsolicited advice is the word, it's like if you're giving advice, but you don't actually understand fully the point you're giving advice to, you could tear someone in a direction for 2 years, 5 years, and it's the wrong direction, right? It's like, so that's what I think is really important is like always being cognizant of what points that you have learned fully and you really understand before you teach those to others. And then coming back to yourself, like, okay, cool. It's all about my process. I got to make sure that I'm doing right things here. Again, that support other people, but making sure that I'm, okay, I went out today. I made this mistake. Why did I make this mistake? Reflect. Okay, I think I made this mistake because of X, Y, and Z. Okay, cool. Where did that come from? Like, and really going deep, understanding, why you're making the mistakes and then fixing them. And I think from there, it's almost a natural byproduct that you support other people because you didn't just memorize it, you actually know.
Yeah. Yeah, that self-reflection piece is so important because so many people either just continue going forward and not taking a moment
Right.
to look back, or else just hitting a dead end and stopping completely and not making adjustments. That's crucial. As far as big picture and like the meta piece of it, which was the third part of it, tell me a little bit about what your vision is long term with the business that you're building and the impact that you're trying to have on families, but then culture as a whole.
Yeah. This is a bit controversial, but we'll see how it goes. It we believe that it is possible to live in a world where basic needs are given to everyone, meaning food, water, shelter, everything is given equally to everyone. And coming from where we're at right now, it's very survival based. And so that sounds like communism or something crazy, but that's not what we mean by it. It's more of there still will be business, there still will be competition and stuff like that, but not at the point where it is now, where we're doing things like, sacrificing another human, another country, another thing like that because of our own survival needs. But you don't fix that through war, right? You have to go to the root of what the problem is. And what the problem is education, meaning from a young age, we weren't given the right foundation of that world. Otherwise, we would have that world right now. But what if we could start to educate the masses, one family at a time, right? It doesn't have to be this huge thing, but one by one, that, okay, cool. It is possible to actually, the golden rule, treat your neighbor as you want to be treated. It's like that's actually possible to do, but you have to get out of this mindset of survival based. And so our big vision, like I said, start with education, and that is a process. It's not, especially as an adult, it's not an overnight thing that you just flip on a switch and you're like, okay, everything in my life now, I'm gonna be not worried about myself. I'm gonna actually consider what would be best in this situation. You have to do it for minimum of 7 years to even get it in. So it's a huge thing, and it might take many, many years, many decades to do. But that's our big goal as a family. That's our big goal as a community, and the techno tutor community is really to help individuals see that as you walk your own process of, okay, in this situation, what's actually going to be best here? Is it all about me? Am I doing this for me? Am I doing this only for my family? Or could we actually have a win-win situation here? And what we have found is as you do that, at first I thought it was impossible, but as you do it one scenario at a time, you realize, okay, that was a win-win. We all benefited from that. I didn't even think we could do that. And then you do the next scenario, and you're like, okay, that was a win. That worked, right? And so you keep compounding those, and you're gonna fall and you're gonna make mistakes and all kinds of stuff. But it's like if we can do that and really get to the root of our education, which is what our parents instilled in us, and we can start to change some of those viewpoints that we have that are just about ourselves, and we can start to actually support, everybody around us, including ourselves.
Nice, I love it. Is it fair to say that kind of an increased focus on learning brings a more universal understanding, which kind of leads to greater harmony overall, culturally speaking?
Yeah, totally. Right. It's like, I'll tell you a story. I taught English in the Dominican Republic. And when I was down there, it was like a school where kids, they weren't able to get into the main school there. And so they were, it's not necessarily troubled kids, just very impoverished. And so they would come in and do stuff. And I built all these cool relationships with kids down there, and it was awesome. And when I was down there, mind you, I was down there for 8 months. Within that 8 months, two of the kids that I was teaching English to, and there was, I think there was 40 total, something like that. Two of them passed.
Hmm.
And I asked the teachers there, I was like, what happened? And in one, there's a river close by, and the child fell into the river, and it's fast. So he's gone. Right. And I was like, whoa, like, why are there not railings, or like, why is that seems crazy to me. And I know the river, I went down there and I've seen it before, and it's like, it is pretty scary, but at the same time, it could be prevented very easily. And so you think, okay, how could we actually prevent this? And why is it not being prevented already? And it comes back to education, right? It could come back to money too, right? But again, if we learned here in the US how to create money, they can learn down there if they're given the same tools and the same support. So it boils down to education. And then the other example, the child, his parents actually beat him to death. And so this is what's going on in third world countries. And I had no idea. That was completely foreign to me. But if you think about it, as you build your education, you become more emotionally stable. And so that the child's parents, the reason they were doing that, not not because they didn't love their child, it was because they were almost possessed by their emotions. I'm almost certain of it, right? And so then you're like, okay, cool. How do you fix that, right? And that starts from a really young age. Those parents are done. They're too far past, obviously, at this point. But if we can get to kids at a young age and actually support them to have a effective education, effective understanding of the world, then all of a sudden they're emotionally stable. Then these problems fix themselves.
Yeah, incredible. So much to think about there.
Yeah.
And all this stuff really aligns so well with my view on legacy is that by having people focus more on their legacy, that we can ultimately change what the future looks like for generations ahead. And I think the learning piece within that is hugely critical. So I appreciate you for what you're doing. Are there any last thoughts about what you're doing and learning and how it pertains to legacy, or anything further you want to share before we share with people how to get in touch with you to learn more about what you're doing?
Yeah, I don't know if you'll put a link underneath this or whatnot, but I think that's probably the best way to do it, is just we can put some type of link there and reach
Sure.
out, or put my email or contact. But I think the biggest thing is really, one, I want to thank you, Josh, for bringing me on. Josh there's not a lot of fathers out that are kind of on that personal development path, or maybe they don't call it that, but they're not really like cognizant of that. But I think no longer can you afford to not do that, because, like I said, the world is moving so fast. So for fathers out there, it's like you got to be on your game and constantly growing, because your kids are going to make a massive impact in this world, and they're not going to have the same life that we had, just because of how fast things are changing. So if you're supporting yourself, you're going to support your kids much better. And so that's going to lead to a much better legacy for not only them and your family, but also everybody else.
Absolutely. Yeah, when it boils down to it, personal development is all about self-learning, in my opinion. So absolutely along the same track of what we've been talking about for the last half hour. So awesome. Well, Sam, thank you again for what you're doing, for what you do at home, for what you do in the community, and for what you're doing at large. I think what you guys are doing is very meaningful, and it's going to have a huge impact, and I hope that everybody else realizes that and will reach out to you to learn more about how you're reshaping the way that we learn.
Awesome. Thanks, Josh. I appreciate it. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. All right. Thanks, ladies and gentlemen. That's been this edition of Legacy Leaders Podcast, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
You've been listening to the Legacy Leaders Podcast with Katie Beth Hand and Stan Miller. For more information on them and the show, please visit pinnaclelegacylaw.com. If you like what you've learned today, do share the program with your friends and subscribe wherever podcasts are found.